Hi kindergarten friends, we're here again with Stuart Little by E.B. White, and we are on chapter 14, An Evening on the River. So remember, last time we read this, Stuart stopped in a little town and a shopkeeper told him about this girl, Miss Harriet Ames, and said that she was very like the same height as him, and he wrote her a letter asking her to come and spend time with him. So now, hopefully we're going to find out what happens. Chapter 14, An Evening on the River. When Stuart arrived at his campsite by the river, he was tired and hot. He put the canoe in the water and was sorry to see that it leaked badly. The birch bark at the stern was held together by a lacing. The water came in through the seam. In a very few seconds, the canoe was half full of water. "Darn it," said Stuart, "I've been swindled." He had paid 76 cents for a genuine Indian birch bark canoe, only to find it leaked. "Darn, darn, darn," he muttered. Then he bailed out his canoe and hauled it up the beach for repairs. He knew he couldn't take Harriet out of the leaky boat. She wouldn't like it. Tired though he was, he climbed a spruce tree and found some spruce gum. With this, he plugged the seam and stopped the leak. Even so, the canoe turned out to be a cranky little craft. If Stuart had not had plenty of experience on the water, he would have gotten into serious trouble with it. It was a tippy boat, even for a souvenir. Stuart carried stones from the beach down to the water's edge and ballasted the canoe with stones until it floated evenly and steadily. So there's a picture of him trying to work in his canoe, trying to fix it up so it doesn't leak. He made a backrest so that Harriet would be able to lean back and trail her fingers into the water if she wished. He also made a pillow by tying one of his clean handkerchiefs around some moss. Then he went for a paddle to practice his stroke. He was angry that he didn't have anything better than a paper spoon for a paddle, but he decided there was nothing he could do about it. He wondered whether Harriet would notice that his paddle was really just an ice cream scoop. All that afternoon, Stuart worked on the canoe, adjusting ballast, filling seams, and getting everything shipshape for the morrow. He could think of nothing else but his date with Harriet. At supper time, he took his axe and felled a dandelion, opened a can of deviled ham, and had a light supper of ham and dandelion milk. Oh, so there's a picture of him and the dandelion. And him eating his dinner. After supper, he propped himself up against a fern, bit off some spruce gum for a chew, and lay there on the bank dreaming and chewing gum. In his imagination, he went over every detail of tomorrow's trip with Harriet. His eyes shut. He seemed to see the whole occasion plainly. Now he's like kind of daydreaming. How she would look at him when she came down the path to the water. How calm and peaceful the river was going to be in the twilight. How graceful the canoe would seem drawn up on the shore. In imagination, he lived every minute of their evening together. They would paddle to a large water lily upstream. He would invite Harriet to step out to the pad and sit a while. Stuart planned to wear his swimming trunks under his clothes so that he would dive off the lily pad to the cool stream. He would swim the crawl stroke up and down and all around the lily pad while Harriet watched, admiring his ability as a swimmer. Stuart chewed the spruce gum very rapidly as he thought about this part of the episode. So here's what he's imagining in his head. He's swimming around and impressing Harriet. Suddenly, Stuart opened his eyes and sat up. He thought about the letter he'd sent and wondered whether it had been delivered. It was a very unusual small letter, of course, and might have gone unnoticed in the letterbox. This idea filled him with fears and worries. But soon he let his thoughts return to the river. As he lay there, a whippoorwill began to sing on the opposite shore. Darkness spread over the land, and Stuart dropped off to sleep. The next day dawned cloudy. Stuart had to go up to the village to have the oil changed in his car, so he hid the canoe under some leaves, tied it firmly to a stone, and went off for his errand, still thinking about Harriet and wishing it was a nicer day. The sky looked rainy. Stuart returned from the village with a headache, but he hoped that it would be better before 5 o'clock. He felt rather nervous, as he'd never taken a girl canoeing before. He spent the afternoon lying around camp, trying on different shirts to see which looked best on him, combing his whiskers. He would sooner get a clean shirt on than he would discover that it was wet under his arms from nervous perspiration, so that means sweat. And he would have to change for a dry one. He put on a clean shirt at 2 o'clock, another at 3 o'clock, and another a 4:15. This took up most of the afternoon. As 5 o'clock drew near, Stuart grew more and more nervous. He kept looking at his watch, glancing up the path, combing his hair, talking to himself, and fidgeting. The day had turned chilly, and Stuart was almost sure that there was going to be rain. He couldn't imagine what he would do if it should rain just as Harriet Ames showed up to go canoeing. At 5 o'clock, at last, 5 o'clock arrived. Stuart heard someone coming down the path. It was Harriet. She had accepted his invitation. Stuart threw himself down against a stump and tried to strike an easy attitude, as though he was accustomed to taking girls out. He waited until Harriet was within a few feet of him and then got up. "Hello there," he said, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "Are you Mr. Little?" asked Harriet. "Yes," said Stuart. "It's nice for you to come." "Well, it's very good of you to ask me," replied Harriet. She was wearing a white sweater and a tweed skirt, a short white wool socks, and sneakers. Her hair was tied with bright-colored handkerchief, and Stuart noticed that she carried a box of peppermints in her hand. So there he is. He's trying to act not nervous, and then she's walking over. Let's see, where were we? "Not at all. Glad to do it," said Stuart. "I only wish we had better weather. Looks rather sticky, don't you think?" Stuart was trying to make his voice sound as though he had an English accent. Harriet looked at the sky and nodded. "Oh well," she said, "if it rains, it rains." "Sure," repeated Stuart. "If it rains, it rains. My canoe is a short distance up the shore. May I help you over the rough places in the path?" Stuart was a courteous mouse by nature, but Harriet said she didn't need any help. She was an active girl, and not at all inclined to stumble or fall. Stuart led the way to where he'd hidden the canoe, and Harriet followed. But when they reached the spot, Stuart was horrified to discover the canoe was not there. It disappeared. Stuart's heart sank. He felt like crying. "The canoe is gone," he groaned. Then he began racing wildly up and down the bank, looking everywhere. Harriet joined in the search, and after a while they found the canoe. But it was a mess. Someone had been playing with it. A long piece of heavy string was tied to one end, and the ballast rocks were gone, and the pillow was gone, and the backrest was gone. The spruce gum had come out of the seam. Mud was all over everything, and one of the paddles was all bent and twisted. It was just a mess. It looked the way a birch-bark canoe looks after some big boys are finished playing with it. Stuart was heartbroken. He did not know what to do. He sat on a twig and buried his head in his hands. "Oh, gee," he kept saying, "oh, gee whiz." So there's a picture of them looking around for the canoe. And then the canoe. It's all bent and broken. And here's him with his head in his hands, thinking, "Oh, geez, I'm so sad. He put in so much hard work." "What's the trouble?" asked Harriet. "Miss Ames," said Stuart in a trembling voice, I assure you I had everything beautifully arranged. Everything. And now look!" Harriet was for fixing the canoe and going out on the river anyway, but Stuart just couldn't stand that idea. "It's no use," he said bitterly. "It wouldn't be the same." "The same as what?" asked Harriet. "The same as the way it was going to be when I was thinking about it yesterday. I'm afraid a woman can't understand these things. Look at the string. It's tied on so tight I could never get it off." "Well," suggested Harriet, "couldn't we just let it hang over in the water and trail along after us?" Stuart looked at her in despair. Did you ever see an Indian paddling along some quiet, spoiled river with a great big piece of rope dragging astern? He asked. We could pretend we're fishing, said Harriet, who didn't realize that some people were fussy about boats. I don't want to pretend I'm fishing, cried Stuart desperately. Besides, look at that mud. Look at it. He was screaming now. Harriet sat down on the twig beside Stuart. She offered him a peppermint, but he shook his head. Well, she said, it's starting to rain, and I guess I'd better be running along if you're not going to take me paddling in your canoe. I don't see why you have to sit here and sulk. Would you like to come up to my house? After dinner, you could take me to the dance at the country club. It might cheer you up. So there's her offering him a peppermint. And Stuart Little, he seems kind of mad, right? He's kind of like throwing a temper tantrum because his plans got messed up. And Harriet's trying really hard to make him not be so cranky. And so she just offered him to go to the country club. She said, it might cheer you up. No, thank you, replied Stuart. I don't know how to dance. Besides, I plan to make an early start in the morning. I'll probably be on the road by daybreak. Are you going to sleep out in all this rain? Asked Harriet. Certainly, said Stuart. I'll just crawl up under the canoe. Harriet shrugged her shoulders. Well, she said, goodbye, Mr. Little. Goodbye, Miss Ames, said Stuart. I am so sorry our evening on the river had to end like this. So am I, said Harriet, and she walked away along the wet path towards Tracy's Lane, leaving Stuart alone with his broken dreams and his damaged canoe. The end. So, what did you guys think about that chapter? Is there anything that you would have changed if you were Stuart Little or Harriet? What did you think about the way he reacted when the canoe was damaged? Do you think that he was using persistence power or not really? I want you to think about some of these things while you're waiting for our next chapter, which is called Heading North.